You're listening to the Curious Equestrian Podcast, produced by Horsemanship Journal and hosted by me, Anna Louise Claydon. Through this podcast, we delve into the enigmatic world of horses, bringing together trainers, behaviourists, and horse owners, each sharing personal stories that deepen our connection with these majestic animals. We unfold diverse stories of horses and their people, stories that inspire, that challenge and transform us. So join as we traverse the depths of equine behaviour and psychology, where curiosity leads the way and every horse has a tale to tell, enriched by a variety of human experiences and insights. This is the Curious Equestrian. In today's episode, we meet some of the faces behind the Athena Herd Foundation, providing a safe space for horses and people, offering equine-facilitated interactions on site for local vulnerable communities and those in need. We meet the founder, Jennifer Geach, and Graham Green, who's been delivering equine-facilitated interactions for well over a decade. Graham helps develop powerful programmes based on mindfulness-led interactions with the Athena Herd horses. Since 2019, the Athena vision has grown and is now a market-leading trainer of equine-facilitated interactions. In this episode, we delve into life with their large herd and find out all about the dynamic of these therapeutic horses living out 24/7 on a track system. We hear how their environment and their mental well-being is prioritised and the special role they play at the foundation. We talk about managing our own energy before spending time with horses, plus we find out some very exciting news for the foundation. Let's dive in, shall we?
Hi there.
Great to be here. Hi, Anna Louise.
Jenny, for those who haven't seen your beautiful track system, made up of all different terrains and landscapes and barns and shelters, just describe what it's like for your herd living out on the track.
Sure, yeah, gosh, so we're at 15 members here, horses from Falabella up to about 18 hand big, which is actually Graham's horse. They all live quite naturally, really. They've got plenty of choice, plenty of movement, plenty of forage. And that was really important for us, really, that they got to live a life, that they could sort of make certain choices, they could move around, and be as natural as they possibly could be, really.
And take us back. When was the moment, when did it hit you that you thought, I want to create something a bit different for my horse's well-being and for that of humans too?
Yeah, so I guess, originally we had 2.5 horses, which is actually two sort of average sized horses plus a Falabella. That's the horse I class as a half. And they were very much living in livery yards, and it was really a combination of the fact that they didn't necessarily do so well being in stables all the time, in the winter months, as is often, the way on livery yards. And as a family, it was really hard to fit the routine of the horses into our routine, I guess, as a family, both working with a very small child. So it was a bit of going through that and some of the challenges that we faced there, to starting to look for a place that would meet all of our needs.
And Graham, take us back to when you were first touched and fell in love with horses.
Oh gosh, I'm certainly not a lifetime journey with horses. It was one of those things when my children were small, and my children are now in their high 20s and early 30s. But it was really a case of very cold Sunday mornings taking them riding or for riding lessons, and someone eventually saying to me, well, why don't you do something? So it was like, yeah, okay, I think I will. I couldn't think of a reason not to. And I took over their hobby, really. And then it's just sort of snowballed ever since then. Their hobby became my hobby. They stopped doing it. I got a horse. And then my horse took over from my family, as they tend to do.
And learning to ride is very different to getting into the world of mindfulness and horses, Graham. When did you make that switch from learning traditionally to ride, which is deemed very sort of normal and traditional in our society, but then to actually working into the sort of natural horsemanship route?
So my background is I used to work in the insurance industry, and I used to run operations teams in the insurance industry. And I used to train a lot of emotional intelligence into the teams that I work with. And as I was doing that, I was working with some consultants, and someone said, in one of those avant-garde or strange off-the-piece conversations that you have, we started to talk about horses and how much I loved horses. And basically they said, oh, we know somebody that teaches that. And I said, yeah, whatever. And you sort of dismiss it. And then the next thing I know, about 3 months later, I was booked on a taster event with somebody to go and find out how horses could help me develop my emotional intelligence. And it's one of those sort of things. I loved it so much I bought the company, sort of thing. So
Wow.
yeah, within 18 months, I was no longer working in insurance, and that is all history. And 13 years have passed, and I haven't been back in a real job ever since.
Wow. Wow, what a
But
journey.
but what you do is that you realise I knew more about horses before I knew about mindfulness. And so this really interesting thing that I found is that when I was learning to ride, I used to have this phrase that I loved riding because I had no past and I had no future. I was just there in the moment. That's what I used to sort of say to people about why I love riding.
Mm.
And actually, that just when I started to develop and train more emotional intelligence and more mindfulness, actually those two things came together. So that was the first link in my mind.
Wow.
Yeah.
And Jenny, take us back before Athena Herd even came to fruition. When did you fall in love with horses?
Gosh, yes. Well, actually, my mum had horses, so there's been a little bit of horses touched, I guess, through my family, and been exposed to that as I was growing up. And then I must have been 11-year-old when I started to sort of have my first horse, and yeah, similar to Graham, very traditional background, traditional, ridden history with horses, and I guess started to question, just question why we do things in the way that we do, or why I did things in the way that I was being told to do things, and I guess that's been a little bit of my journey, moving through horses.
And when you were at that stage trying to juggle, as you say, your lifestyles, your job, your family life, and the horses, and you thought, oh, actually, we need to change up the way that we're operating, what drew you down the track system route? Because I think they were quite new to the UK when you started using a track system.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right there, Anna Louise. So we've been at the property we're in today for actually 10 years. We've sort of been doing a bit of we're celebrating our 10 years of Athena
Oh,
this year. And we moved, and it really was a story about a horse called Eldorado. He's very much, he really is at the heart of everything we do, Graham, isn't he? Our training programs, the track system. He's quite, he's sort of the mascot, really, I think, of Athena in a sense. And he really struggled on traditional livery yards. We moved him to one, he colicked. He was the horse that sort of fought with all the other horses' rugs, out in the field, and all the other owners didn't particularly want him in with their horses, because he was always, playing tug of war with their very expensive
oh no.
rugs. So it was a lot of that, and the way he was, and he used to sort of throw head collars at people, as they walked past his stable, and he was quite a little rebel, really. So we just got the feeling that it wasn't really the right environment for him. And that was why we looked for a property. So when we moved to the property that we're in today, it's approximately 17 acres, and it had a mix of uses, I think is probably the fair way to describe it. And so it didn't have a big block of stables. It didn't have fencing everywhere for horses. So it was a piece of land that was really a project, so we could do quite a bit with it. And we had a barefoot trimmer come over, because I was sort of thinking, right, we'll start from scratch. We'll take some of these shoes off. We'll just draw a line in a way under where we were at the moment and what we're going to do. And that lady introduced me to the concept of track systems, and I'd never heard of them before that moment, really.
And you're in that position, Jenny, where you're a horse person, but you're also a landowner. And lots of landowners have quite a lot of opinions about track systems. And they often say, oh, well, it wrecks the ground and, you know, it's beyond repair. In the end, it sort of gets turfed up. What were your thoughts about working with the land and making it work for the horses, but also taking the land management into account as well?
So, yeah, really, another really good point you make there, that actually as well, I hadn't mentioned before, but the land we're on is clay. So, I mean, we've had up to 21 horses on the land here, and it's done very, very well because of the fact we've introduced a very sympathetic way of having horses on the land, and designing it very much around the way the water runs on the land, the way the winter months take a toll on the clay, if you like. So we've got quite a large barn area that the horses really do use in the winter months, and actually they choose not to be on the land so much, if you like, and not having shoes on again makes them quite sympathetic to the land. And we very much rest a lot of the land areas through the winter months, and we make our own hay off the land. And we do a lot of replanting wild seed and introduce sort of bees and different aspects into our land management. So I think actually the way we have worked with our land has been very sympathetic, and having horses on it has not been necessarily detrimental to that.
And in case those who are listening don't know what a track system is, it is quite literally a track that weaves around the land that the horses stay on, and you can open up different areas, can't you? Different meadows, different paddocks, and allow them in and out. But generally they stay on the track, which is sort of a mix of muddy ground and different terrain. And have you added anything, Jenny, to the land, like rubber matting or anything like that?
Yeah, so we've been quite fortunate as well. So our barn had a very natural base, and that we found that very good from a drainage point of view. So we haven't, again, we've tried to not interfere with the land too much. We have got some surfaced areas, one of which was already here at the property when we moved in. So again, we've really tried to work with that. We have introduced some mud mat areas as well to the land. But to be fair, the horses are very sensible. They tend to actually hang out in the areas that is appropriate for them in the winter months. We tend to leave, one of the aspects, I guess, of track systems is, should the horses have access to grass. We're a little bit of the view that actually grass has its benefits, as long as it's, again, it's that reseeding and looking at your pH levels and making sure your grasses are very horse friendly, if you like, through the sort of meadow grasses and wildflower. So we do tend to leave paddocks open, but it's about letting them have plenty of time to rest, recuperate, reseed if you need to, and just try and be as sympathetic to that with the horses, but encouraging them to move as much as possible through the winter months to areas that work for them in the winter months. So we're really, we're sort of all about that.
It's really interesting for those who don't know that myself and Jenny met a few years ago now, when track systems were quite a new concept in the UK, because originally it came from America, and we did a piece for BBC Radio 4 explaining what track system were and how it works with farmers and landowners, horse keepers and smallholders. So fascinating. But now we all talk about track systems as equestrians, and we all know what they are, and we've heard of someone that's got one, or we're trying to do it ourselves. So really interesting. Graham, how did you meet Jenny and embark on the journey of Athena Herd together?
Well, we were put in contact with each other actually by a third party that was essentially providing business advice, and it was actually that how to help people develop the services that they provide through their yards. And Jennifer was interested in equine-facilitated learning and equine-facilitated interactions, all of that sort of space. And that was something that I was practicing at that time, and I was working with the lady concerned. And she said, "Oh, the two of you should meet." So we did. And, that was 2016. So that's still quite a way away. And we just sort of slowly, basically, really just sort of found our feet, explore the different things that we were doing. So I also had some other stuff that I was running at the time. So that was interesting for me. That developed stuff for me. It gave Jennifer some time to find out a little bit more about the whole equine facilitated world as well, personally. And so really, I think it was about 2018, which is, my horse Ernie also went to live as part of the Athena herd. And that then became really a foundation for us just starting to work together and just starting to explore different ways of working. So one of the things that always struck me, from the very first time that I stepped onto the Athena space, is that actually by creating a place that is so strong, so powerful for the animal well-being, there's an incredible energy for people as well. And so it creates something quite unique in terms of the value of human well-being, because you have a place that is founded on the well-being of the animals. And so it just seemed a wonderful place to work. And so we started to explore, running little taster events, running well-being retreats, meditation sessions, things like that, and just trying different ways of bringing people together with the herd. And then it's really, from our point of view, has grown from that point onwards. And that also included us then starting to think about developing our own training program.
Amazing. And Graham, going back to what you were saying about teaching people emotional intelligence. Now, I thought that was something we either had as people or we don't, that's a skill or a gift that we're born with, or actually it's lacking in people. Right. If someone has no emotional intelligence, what can they learn from horses, and how emotionally intelligent can they become?
So I think a really good way of thinking about this is the fact that, horses are emotionally intelligent by their nature. They're emotionally and socially intelligent, okay? So it's about starting to open up that idea, open people up to this idea that actually these animals in front of you have essentially emotional behaviors that tie in or are very similar to things that we might recognize in ourselves. And so it's about creating that space for people, and then giving them that opportunity to recognize that actually the way to learn about emotion is through feedback. It's about recognizing how animals, how people respond to you when you behave a certain way. That tells you a little bit about how you are and about how they are. And so it's about, and this idea, you started by saying, what about if people have no emotional intelligence? Okay, so I'm sure we all know a few people like that.
I didn't want to say.
But what is also the case is that it is a skill that's always developed. So there's this concept called neuroplasticity, which means that your brain grows throughout your life. And one of the things that they have proven now is that emotional intelligence is something that you can develop well into your 70s, even into your 80s. So, I'm now 60. I'm not stuck with it. I can change, I can learn, I can develop. And we can all learn and develop. And it's about opening that. So it's first of all, it's about opening people up to the idea that they can change. But then it's giving them the means of understanding how they can change. And so the way that this works is that you take a human being and you place them alongside an emotionally intelligent animal. And how that human being is in that moment is often then, it becomes, you see the behavior of the horse reflecting the emotional state of the person they bring to it. So essentially, what will happen is, and this is one of the things that we talk to people about all the time, that the horses will move towards what is comfortable to them and move away from what is less comfortable for them. So if we're taking in that space something that the horse feels uncomfortable with, the horse will move away. But that simple, just moving away from and moving towards, is a very simple, non-judgmental way of showing people that the effects that they have can be shown in the behaviors of others, or the effects of how they are is shown in the behavior of those around them. But then it gets really powerful, because we talk about experiential learning, which is basically we can learn from actually doing things, not this idea of what we learn and what we read or what we write down. This action, doing something. By acting differently, we get a different reaction from the horse. And it is that actual felt sense of, I took a different version of myself to the horse, and the horse behaved differently, which shines a light on the fact that actually, so what would that mean if I were slightly different with my children? What would that mean if I was slightly different with my colleagues? What would that mean if I was even slightly differently with myself?
It's so interesting that actually our behaviours towards our animals, we need to look at our behaviours across our entire lives. We need to look at how we are and who we are as people, not just who we are with our horses in the arena or in the stable or in the field. Jenny, you mentioned moving to this track system and in the early days with just a few horses. How did you go about building your herd, and at what point did you think, actually, I want to open this up not just for myself and friends and family, but I want to open this herd out?
Yeah, no, again, great question. I guess in a way Graham has alluded to that. It was really where our journeys passed, wasn't it, Graham? It was sort of the 2018 sort of time frame that I felt we'd created a very nice environment. The horses were very happy, very relaxed. And actually, they were curious. They were curious about people. They wanted to engage with people. And that was really my driver for moving into the equine assisted facilitated space. Yeah, so I think that was really where I came from in this. It was about creating a nice environment for the horses where they are happy, they are relaxed, they want to engage with others, and essentially then starting to open that up through my sort of pathway crossing with Graham.
And how did you go about building your herd? How did you pick the horses that would join the herd? Because you've got some very interesting breeds as well, if I can say, Jenny. A lot of people think, oh, I'm going to use stereotypes here, but I think a lot of people think, lovely calm horses for therapeutic purposes, probably the cooler, calmer breeds that we may associate like cobs. You've got some very athletic competition horses as part of your therapeutic herd. So talk us through who joined you and who they are.
Yeah, it's an interesting point you make there about cobs, because actually we recently visited a very well established centre for the day, and we had a conversation about this very same thing ourselves. And from a safety point of view, cobs have quite big feet, actually. So if you're thinking of
Yes.
your client and safety aspects, if a cob stands on a client's foot, they're actually, that's quite a safety a safety point to think about. So
I say that
it's
having
interesting how
got a
everybody
cob
kind of
cross Connemara myself and knowing full
you're
well
nodding.
how big they are, but also just quickly, not to go off on a great tangent, but I love the way I say stereotypically, because Winnie, as a cob cross Connemara, she is fiery, she is lively, she's seen most days galloping and bolting and bronking about, and I love that everyone stereotypically says, oh, the lovely safe cob. Well, actually, if they met my cob cross Connemara, they would totally change that opinion. But sorry, Jenny, carry on.
Another really that's another great point you're making there, Anna Louise. So yeah, but no, as you say, I mean, my mum actually shows miniature horses, and actually it was interesting. She started to move into that space after I sort of got my first Falabella here, really as a pet, Ricardo. And we've got so we've sort of got falabellas. We've started to introduce, we've actually got a couple of fell ponies now. You'll have to come and meet them.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, a lot of the horses here are, as you rightly say, warm blood sport horses. And I've got a Welsh pony as well, can't forget the Welsh pony. So we've got quite a and Graham, your horse is
Irish draft.
Irish
Oh,
draft. So yeah,
lovely.
we've got quite a collection of horses, and I guess I haven't gone with the rescue approach. And again, I think a lot of the people that do the work can come from sort of the rescue horse approach. We tend to get them very young here. I tend to actually buy the horses from weaning.
Oh, wow.
And again, what I really I'm looking for is the horses to really get that positive interaction from people as early as they can. And that's really
Mm,
my rationale for getting them young, getting them as soon as I can, so they've not necessarily gone through any traumatic experiences aside
mm,
from being weaned and leaving mum, which I absolutely recognise. So I prefer to get them younger, but I guess in terms of types of horses, I mean the warm blood sport horses, I'm sure Graham would like to contribute a little bit here, but you get quite a quick response from them. They're very authentic in the space, and you do get a lovely response from them in the equine assisted interaction space, Graham, don't you?
Yeah, Graham, talk us through that.
And I think there's a recognition, okay, as people, we're the product of the encounters that we have with other people. Yeah, we're a product of our social encounters. Our horses, particularly towards other people, are often the reflection or the creation of their interactions with human beings. And as Jennifer says, if you by having them from weaning, what Jennifer's doing is limiting the amount of influence that other human beings have on that horse's view of other human beings. And so this is one of the things that works so well with that strategically for us delivering equine facilitated interactions and learning and therapy and things like that, is that essentially you get a very authentic horse. You get a horse that's not soured to people. Yeah, and so it quite often those horses, they're comfortable in their environment because they live together as a herd, and they're comfortable with human beings coming into that herd and don't feel that as a risk or as a threat of some kind. And so what you get is you get a curiosity, an interest in engaging. You'll get this sort of, okay, so what's going on here? Who's this? What's going on with this person? And so as long as, if Jennifer and I can work with those people and get them to a point where we can take them into the space, and it doesn't disrupt the herd in any way, but the herd just becomes curious and interested in what they're being part of. That's an incredible life learning for people, but it's a really important thing to reflect on the herd. But then it's what we also know is that because they're not excessively trained how to behave alongside human beings, you'll get a very quick and authentic response from them. So they're not, you're getting a natural equine response rather than a conditioned learning experience. So for example, if you take someone in, or you take a horse in that does excessive amount of natural horsemanship skills to quite a high level, then is what their behavior will be as soon as a human being is into that space, is they will go to their default learned behaviors, and those default learned behaviors might be different to what their natural equine behaviors are.
Oh, that's really interesting. And Graham, do you notice having a mixed herd as well with different breeds? Do the different breeds bring different elements to a mindfulness session and a horsemanship session, rather than if you were to have all warm bloods or all little falabella ponies or etc.?
I think it's about the individual horses, and I think I'll hand over to Jennifer on this one as well. But I think it's about the individual horses. And I don't think you can be absolute about it, actually. I think it is about once you get into the sort of environment that we're talking about, there is space, and the animal has the space to be itself, whatever that means. I don't necessarily think it matters whether you have a warm blood sport horse or a cob. They're free to be themselves. But I think, Jennifer, you probably...
Yeah, no, thanks, Graham. I think that summed that up lovely. But they definitely have all got their individual characters, their individual personalities. We created a set of cards around that, our equine insights, and we've actually sort of matched the words of those cards to almost the personalities of the individual horses. But what's quite interesting, so Marzipan is one of those horses. She is a warm blood sport horse, and people though that seem to be, either looking for love or sort of seeking out a feeling of love, they tend to gravitate to Marzipan, for example. So I think it's just interesting how their characters, their natural characteristics, into like a person, we're all different. We've all got different strengths and weaknesses in our lives. The horses are very much the same. The fell ponies have been a really interesting journey for us. They're probably quite different. Well, they're very different in character to the warm bloods, and we see them, or I see them, roaming around a lot more than actually some of the warm bloods in the English weather, if you like. So it might be raining and storming out there, the warm bloods are seeking shelter in the barn, but actually the fell ponies are off seeking out whatever it is they're seeking out around the track, for example, on a cold and windy day. But otherwise they're all just unique characters, I guess, in the herd. I think the other point to mention is the boys and girls, the geldings. We've got a couple of little colts that are about to be gelded this year, which are the newer horses that have just come in. They're all together, but again, their personalities are very different. If they're a mare, if they're a gelding, if they're a colt. So I think it's just embracing, the difference
Do you
in the
have a
herd.
preference? I know in the equestrian sphere, everyone seems to have a preference, don't they? You hear people saying, "Oh, I'd never touch mares." You've got people saying, "I'd only ever have mares." Do you two have a preference? Is it a mixed herd?
Can I? Yes, I'll grab
Yeah,
that to
go on,
start with,
Jenny.
and I know
Yeah.
Graham probably got
You
quite a
do.
lot to say on that topic as well. They communicate differently. I think what's been really interesting for us in the equine facilitated interaction space is it's that communication with the individual that we're really looking for. You can call it a response, you can call it a reaction. They just communicate very differently. Graham, did you want to add to that?
Mm.
Yeah, and I think it's also recognizing that we all, as you say, we all have our stereotypes. We all have this is what I'd like to have. This is my perfect vision of the thing. But when you actually stop and you create the space for them to interact a little bit more on their terms, you give them a little bit of agency in the process, if you like, for want of a description. You get different elements of their characters come out. And I think this is, to build on Jennifer's point, a lot of people will talk about a bad-tempered mare or a crabby mare or a bit, and keeping away from those horses. But the thing that we found, and we found this time and time again, is that if we get the human being to manage who they are, to become present, to become, calm or still in themselves, for want of a better description, the mares are actually much more supportive of that person.
Mm.
So actually, they will come to that person out of choice, and quite often you might get a brief visit from the geldings, but actually the mares will come and stand with them.
Oh.
The mares will come and hold space with them. It almost seems very slightly maternal sometimes if you look at it from the outside. And the other thing that we've really noticed is that we've learned to recognize that our horses or Jennifer's horses are communicating with us. And to recognize that their behavior, as we often say to people, their behavior is communication. And if we acknowledge their behavior as communication, we've noticed how their behavior changes when they recognize that they're being heard. And so, we've got one mare, bless her, who has actually quite demonstrative in terms of actually expressing herself through her front legs. But what has happened over time, because she recognized that we saw that she was communicating with us, that communication has ceased to be a kick and has been a sort of a gentle pawing, almost like a dog will coming over to you, will raising its paw to have its belly scratched. So you've seen this, and so this is the thing that, we get so wound up in how we want our horses to be that we forget to see our horses as they are. And I think one of the things that happens for the horses at Athena so much is that they get recognized for who they are. And by being recognized for who they are, they learn that they can express themselves much more subtly. And that can be really powerful for people's learning.
And a question for both of you. We all, those who are listening, most likely have horses or a connection to horses in some way, whether it be that they loan, lease or ride at a riding school or have their own horse. It's quite unusual to be present in a large herd. It's quite an unusual thing. We're often either dealing with our own horse, or like myself, I've got 3, but that I imagine is very different to walking out in amongst 15 horses. So how do you do that? And also, how do you do that safely at your Athena herd?
We tend not to treat. The horses are not hand fed here at Athena. That's something else. So as we mentioned earlier, I like them when they come to us young. They learn if they get a feed, it's in a feed, it's in a feed bucket. It generally isn't on the track. So the track is their environment. They're free to move around. Um, and actually, myself and Graham, we talk quite a lot about the ability to regulate, having always got access to food. So therefore we don't tend to get the mellies in the gateways, because there are no gateways, if you like, because it is just a track system. They are just moving around and free to come and go to the barn, to the fields, over time. So from that perspective, you don't get this sort of crowding, if you like, of the herd. If a person goes into the herd, they are just generally doing their thing. They're generally where they want to be, hanging out with who they want to be. And that doesn't tend to change when an individual goes into that space, because they're quite used now to that, I guess, as well, over time. But as Graham has alluded to, I think throughout this conversation we're having, it's actually all about the individual. It's about managing that individual before we even take them into that space. And Graham, did you want to maybe start to pick up on that point?
Yeah, I mean, so we have a very simple approach in that respect, that we wouldn't take people into the horses to get them to undertake an exercise, for want of a better description, if they hadn't already done it. So very simply, if we're running a grounding routine or we're doing a breath-based meditation or something like that, we will always get the people to practice that first outside. Okay? So that works two ways. That means that we know that we establish something that person can work with, because not everyone can do a breath-based meditation. A lot of people, particularly a lot of people who've experienced trauma, are uncomfortable doing breath-based meditation. So again, it's about finding different ways that person can work. So that might be just finding them to connect with their feet, to connect with the ground beneath their feet, or a sensation in their body. But finding that place for that person. But you find that place for that person before they join the horses. And then it's about, okay, so the two things happen at this point. You've prepared them with some exercises or some routines that they can take into that space. You get them to take that into that space and to try and engage that, and then see. And we know from experience about, you can't. It's a herd of horses. You can't legislate for everything that's going to happen. So we always have extra pairs of eyes. So we'll always, for example, when either of us are working, there'll be one of us will be backing the other one up, or there'll be somebody else there providing eyes on. So you have that. You always have that safety thing. But you do ensure that people have those skills and resources to calm themselves, to bring their energy down. And then actually what happens is that the power of the learning happens, because it's all well and good being able to calm yourself when you're sitting in a room on the sofa and it's nice and warm or whatever it is. But then being able to calm yourself when you get into a social situation, or when you get out into a crowded room, or when you get into a herd full of horses. And so this is that point. It becomes a transferable learning. People are able to learn to take away that skill, because what they've done is not just done it in a room, in a nice little safe space, but they've also gone into a space that they might perceive a little bit risky, and been able to engage it. But the key thing is, you've always got to have eyes on, and that's something that we're really passionate about, making sure that there's always somebody there to keep eyes on the safety as well.
Yeah, and I was going to just add to that and just say, I don't know, we haven't mentioned it yet, that Athena has got 3 arms. So we've got an arm that we call the awarding arm, we've got the training arm, and we've got a community arm. And under the community arm, we work quite a lot under funded projects, money's garnered from, for example, the National Lottery. And Graham runs quite a few of those projects with groups of vulnerable adults on site. And we wouldn't just take an individual into that environment on the first session. And that applies also to the training arm, where we're working with learners, working with students. So we would build that interaction. So potentially the first session here may actually be just an observation session of the herd. We wouldn't necessarily take them into that environment on day one, on session one. And session 2 could just be being up intimate with one of the herd members, you know. So it's building that resilience, if you like, before we take them in with that amount of horses, you know, if that's something that we feel we need to do.
I think it is that thing about not flooding people, you know. So we're very passionate about setting people up for success. So we don't want to create a situation which someone will feel overwhelmed by. And so this is as Jennifer pointed out, when we have time and we have a program that we can deliver, we can build that slowly. But it's always about, you never ask anyone to do anything, even just observing them, but they haven't had a go at on their own in a little safe space. So it's always this slow process, and that's been really effective, you know. And so in that community space, you know, we've worked with veterans from RBLI. We've worked with local cared for communities. We do occasional one-to-one work, and it's about creating a space for those groups where they can slowly build the resources and skills that they need, and letting them, to a degree, set the pace.
That's so interesting. And I was going to ask you both how you make a herd of 15 horses accessible to those who are vulnerable and to those who have additional needs as well. Because we do talk of our horses as people because that's who they are, but that also can be quite a dangerous situation. So it's interesting hearing you talking about how there are eyes on, because I think it's important we have that, the ability to relax with our animals and to be in the moment and to maybe close our eyes and to be mindful, but also knowing that actually it's okay to feel a bit intimidated, even if you are a quote unquote horsey person, because standing in amongst 15 horses can be quite intimidating. So I was going to ask, how do you gradually make a herd of 15 horses accessible to someone who might have additional needs and who also might have never even been close to a horse ever before?
Yeah, so again, we're working with cared for communities and think, you know, these are people that some of those cared for communities come basically from backgrounds of a variety of different mental health challenges, from anxiety through, in some cases, to mild psychosis. And so again, it's about essentially, again, really explaining. So we take a lot of time to explain to people what they're going into and why we're doing this work. And we do talk about that sort of whole social intelligence that you get in a herd. So, for example, with the veterans work, when we've been working with veterans, being able to help veterans to see the parallel between the social support that a herd gives itself compared to the social support that a squad of soldiers would give to itself. This understanding that actually they're there together, they've got each other's backs. Yeah, they're there to support each other. It's about beginning to really, really just starting to give people parallels. Now, this is the important thing, I think, is you know, it's making sure that people can recognize something of their own challenges and experiences in the horses that they're with. So it helps them. What's dangerous often is that we don't understand what we're in the part of or what we're in the middle of. And so it's about recognizing for people that actually this is just something that's normal for them. And it's recognizing how the herd supports the herd. You know, if you take a horse out of a herd, its behavior will be very, very different to what it is within the herd. There is this social regulation that exists when they're living and being on a day-by-day basis with their peers, which actually, counter to a lot of common interpretation, makes it a safer place to go into if you have trained or you have the skills to manage your energy and focus.
And actually, to delve into that a little bit more, Graham, when you've talked a few times about managing your own energy and sort of focusing in on your own energy and bringing it down. How does someone go about that in preparation for being around horses and being in amongst a herd?
Well, so it's about learning. It can be simple meditative. It's a meditative technique. Okay, so and by meditative, I use the word meditative, not mindful. Okay, so the distinction I'm drawing is that meditation is about setting the intention of where we wish to place our attention, and recognizing that we're distracted, and we can bring ourselves back when we're distracted to that place of attention, or that intended place of attention. And that might be a breath, if that's the sort of person. It might be on a sound. It might be on a physical sensation. It might be just on the touch of putting your hand against something. It's about developing this ability to manage our attention. And that's the skill, that's what we're trying to teach people. It's that, because we're the thing that causes so many of us problems on a day-by-day basis is when our attention is constantly drawn here, there, and everywhere. But actually, when you want to be in the space with the horse, you want your attention to be either on the horse or on that part of your body, or that thing or that space that you choose to meditate on. And so it is about developing that skill. And we don't call it meditation. We might call it a grounding. We might call it being present. We might call it earthing yourself, or just feeling the senses in your body, or hearing the sounds around you. But it's essentially a meditative practice.
And one that can help us in all aspects of our life, not just in the field in amongst 15 horses. You know, we can use that in so many different settings, can't we? And something I guess both of you never saw coming is that, you know, as human beings, we've always had mental health. We've all got mental health, but you never saw the pandemic coming. And I know we don't always want to say and talk about life pre and post pandemic, but it is unavoidable in the conversation we're having that you were setting up this mindful practice, this herd to help communities and help people, and then you were hit with a global pandemic. What happened, and how did that change your perspective and your direction?
In terms of a business, actually, it didn't, in a way, because we'd already set up an environment that was outside, that was in nature, and there were a lot of caveats through COVID that we could still support people with some of the mental health challenges. So we were very lucky to have volunteers still coming down and supporting the horses, which helped to support them through the pandemic.
Yeah.
So in a sense, Athena continued as Athena through the pandemic. The horses did less individual work with people. They saw less clients in the space, if you like. But we were very fortunate from a training point of view that we carried on training online. We were very agile. We'd moved to online just shortly before the pandemic. So as a training centre, in terms of actually being able to support facilitators wanting to get into this space and help them to train to be in this space, we carried on and were actually very busy online through the pandemic.
Well, that's brilliant. But in terms of after the pandemic, have you seen a greater need? Have you seen more people reaching out in need of your services and mindfulness and meditative practices because of what's happened?
That's a really good question. And I think that's maybe where we can draw in the awarding arm and the work we've been doing under the awarding arm. And Graham, I'll pass over to you in a moment to talk about that. But I think actually on the whole, what we're doing and the work, so the equine-assisted, facilitated interaction, learning, psychotherapy work, lots of umbrellas, lots of words for the work, has got more and more known, more and more popular, a little bit like, if you know, the track systems, if you like. The track systems now are fairly known in terms of what they are and what they bring to the benefits of the horses, and we're seeing more and more of them, as you said right at the beginning of our conversation. This work, so the equine facilitated interactions work, is definitely becoming more known, possibly, as you say, as a direct result of the pandemic, in that the benefits, of being outside in nature, being alongside the horses, is definitely becoming more known. And that's maybe where the work that we've been doing with the Professional Standards Authority, Graham, we could maybe talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so I think just to reflect, post-pandemic, there is definitely an uptick in the requirement. And that makes sense. I'm sure that's been explored in many environments. So, but I think one of the things that was really important for us was that actually the pandemic also gave us an opportunity to actually think about other areas that we should also be thinking about focusing our attention. And one of those things is about this growth in equine-facilitated interactions. What has happened over probably about the last 5 to 10 years is that all around the UK, this stuff has been growing up. Lots of people are now being trained in it, whether they're trained in the UK or with some of the providers in the US. But a lot more people are trained to do this, and there's a lot more practice being undertaken. And the thing is, this work is so powerful. Yeah, that embodied nature about this work is so powerful that it needs to have a degree of, or people engaging with that process need to have a degree of protection. And so that's not to say that people are unwittingly causing issues, but the thing is, what we want to try and do is that there is a need to get this practice regulated, or more importantly, to get it recognized by proper health and social care providers. So people in the NHS, people who are doing, organizations providing mental health support and things like that, know that this service is out there and know that it is something that they can engage and know that their clients can be referred to it and handled and cared for safely within that practice. And so this is a key part of what we've been doing with a little bit of the time that the pandemic afforded us, is working with the Professional Standard Authority. And the idea of that being essentially that we now hold the first accredited register in the UK for people or practitioners providing therapeutic and learning and well-being related interactions.
And a huge congratulations on that, because some big news, isn't it? And what does that mean, Graham, for the industry?
It means that there is now, and the good thing, when we're at pains now to point this out, this is something that we have put in place for the industry. This is not something that we've put in place for ourselves. It is something that our learners benefit from, but they benefit from it because it exists and because of the work that we've done. But this is for the whole marketplace. This is for anyone that wishes it out there practicing some form of equine facilitated interaction. It's an opportunity to get your name on a register that is recognized by the health and care and social care providers and network across the UK. So the Professional Standards Authority is an independently run adjunct of government. This is UK. This is essentially comes out of the Health and Social Care Act 2012. Yeah. So this is a means by which, if you want to find someone to do equine facilitated interactions with, you can look up a practitioner. You can find a practitioner who is registered and proven to be providing safe and ethically based professional standards of interaction.
Wow. You must both feel incredibly proud of that achievement.
Yeah, no, we definitely are. And I think, it's really important for the people that you were describing there, Anna Louise, the people that really do need this service. And I think hopefully then this will make what we're doing more readily available for those people.
Because horses are still seen in society as a bit of a luxury, aren't they? How often do we hear someone will mention horses, someone else who doesn't know an awful lot about horses might say, oh, they're rich, or, they've got loads of money, or they must be show jumpers, eventers, etc. Do you hope to change the face of equestrianism and what horses mean in the community?
I think it's about shining a light on them, that they are actually a living, sentient being, with needs that are comparable to our own needs, if you like. I think that's really where we come from. That's where Athena comes from, in terms of creating that environment for them and then for people to be able to benefit from that.
I think for me, I've always had a motivation to just help people see horses differently. We have them, they're in a box, however you define that box, and I think you did it quite well, Anna Louise, but there's much more. We think about how we are with our dogs, how we are with our cats, and we have very different behaviors sometimes towards our horses. And so it's about helping people to see our horses differently, because then our horses will benefit from that. And I think that's what we've shown as well, actually. I think that's what we in the work that we're doing. We've shown time and time again that when we see our horses, when we recognize our horses, when we see them differently, actually they become different as well.
Because, of course, hundreds of years ago, horses were very much a part of the average person's life, of the everyday person. And I think now they are seen as almost a luxury part of people's lives. Either they're maybe to compete, or maybe they're to ride and to hack out, which of course we love. I still ride horses and absolutely love the element of riding in the saddle and being out and trying different things. But I think there's a very special bond that maybe we're missing in modern society, where people would work with their horses previously. People would use them on the farm, they'd be part of the family, but now it seems that they're slightly removed. Do you agree?
Yeah, it's a very good point that you make. But let's not forget, there's still plenty of room in the world for enjoying our horses in that way. So I think even with the herd at Athena, there's 2 or 3 horses in the herd at Athena that are there can be ridden and very good at it, given that opportunity. May not be top of the agenda, but there are horses that are there and can do that. But I do think you make a very good point about this whole idea of actually human relationships with horses has changed very significantly, probably over about the last 50 years. And historically, the horse was so much part of the human economy, both the global economy or the national economy and the individual family economy. And so there was this importance in understanding the horse and the well-being of the horse. How many families fed their horses before they fed themselves? Because without their horses, they had no livelihood. And that was created a very special link between 2 very different species. But where we are today, I do think some of that has been lost because the horses now are very much in a recreational space.
I think through the work we're doing, we're making them much more accessible. That's definitely the case through the funded work. That we're very lucky to get funding, as I mentioned earlier, from National Lottery, Kent Community Foundation. We're sort of getting local funding as well as national funding. I think what's been really interesting for me, and again, having a horsey background, and not taking horses for granted, but just having horses as part of my life for a lot of my life. Um, we see them as they are, but when we do work with people that have maybe never been up close to a horse, we really start to realize how people don't realize a lot about horses. Even if they're just driving through the country and see them in a field, they don't necessarily realize that they do cough, they are warm, they can sneeze, they do like being with others, and all of these great things. And bless people, they don't necessarily see all those factors in a horse. So it's lovely that we can actually, as Graham always says, sort of shine a light on that for people that have maybe never had access to a horse before they come and do a bit of work with us.
Yes. Again, this is a question for both of you, but tell us the changes you've seen in the people that you've worked with. So those who we've talked about, who are vulnerable, who have been through trauma, who might have additional needs. How have some of if you've got a couple of examples, obviously don't name them, but how have they changed through your work in the herd?
So I think one of the most profound stories that has come up from the work that we do was we had one gentleman who he had an issue with his weight, let's put it that way, and he came as part of a 6-week program with us, working from a local cared for community. And we went through the program, and he got a lot out of it. He was clearly You could clearly see him working out, finding that he could ground himself, enjoying the interactions with the horses. But one of the things that was really powerful about that, we didn't find out until 5 months later. And essentially, what we found out was that as a result of that time he spent with the horses, he also realized he had a choice about how he was.
Oh,
And he lost 6 stone
wow.
over about 5-month period. He lost 6 stone over a 5-month period. And so such that we actually had invited some people back, and most of us almost didn't recognize him.
Wow.
But that was a direct impact of the empowerment that he individually got as an individual from that learning.
That's amazing. In your experience, how do the horses help those who don't almost even realise they need help themselves in other aspects of their lives, like that gentleman?
We were having this conversation the other day with a group of fairly new learners that are just starting to come through some of our training programs, that it's actually about how good we are as a facilitator to hold that space, because actually we've all got that within us. So it's supporting a person to be able to find that within themselves, isn't it, Graham? And I know it was a really great conversation.
It's about really being able to help. Again, it's that phrase that Jennifer's used a couple of times, that shine a light on. It's about helping people to build gently helping people to develop a self-awareness. Yeah, and what happens, because this work is embodied, some people call it somatic. Basically it's your whole body. You take your whole person. If you think about anything you do with a horse, you can't have a conversation with a horse. It's about your whole body. It's about how you physically are. Okay, so what that means is that you may not think you have an issue with something, but sometimes your body will still display that issue, and the horses will pick that up. Remember, thinking about, I said earlier about this moving towards and moving away from, this simple exercise, simple wanting to be part of it or wanting to be away from it. The horses will pick that up in your body language. And the thing is, there's nowhere to hide. It can be scary for people. There is nowhere to hide because your whole person is there. We can all hide behind our words. We can all hide behind a bit of a fake smile or something like that. But actually, when your whole person is engaged in the process, you have nothing but the truth. And that's where, there's a quote from the US that 1 session with a horse is equivalent to 5 on the couch, because it's this physical embodied reality and completeness that what's there comes up.
Yeah.
And that's what's so powerful about this.
And if I may just add to that, our jobs as facilitators is just to hold that space for you, to let you, if you like, unfold or uncover that.
And as a training centre, are you seeing lots of exciting new ways that horses are being used for therapeutic practices? Are you seeing people coming to you with ideas to say, I want to set up this idea, I want to use horses in this way? Are you seeing a whole new influx of ideas on how horses can help people?
Yeah, so I think, again, as a training centre, we very much come at this that we're really supporting people to bring their skills and their passions, if you like, to the space. So maybe that is in a sense where you're coming from there, Anna Louise, that people from really different backgrounds are actually coming into this space with horses. So we may get teachers, we may get social workers, we may get a riding instructor. But in the same vein, we will get the sort of traditional sort of therapy sort of types of people that you would expect in this space. So you get the sort of counselling psychotherapy space, but there's also the occupational therapists. So there's a lovely wide range of people that are recognising the benefits of horses, that are wanting to draw on maybe some of their own personal experiences with horses and some of their career aspirations, if you like, and sort of really drawing the two together, which is why we've got a really lovely community at Athena under the training arm of a real mixed backgrounds, of people that are able to bring different expertise, if you like, to the space.
So with your new register, will it be that doctors and consultants can prescribe time with horses at one of the facilitated interaction centres?
I think so. There's two things, two elements to that answer. Okay, for you, Anna Louise. First of all, there's actually something called social prescribing, which is already out there right now, which means that GPs can make funds available to alternative practices for essentially emotional and mental well-being of their clients. Okay, so that's already there. However, what you have is quite often a reluctance to engage with something that seems a bit strange, a bit different, a bit outside the standard practice. What the register will do will enable professional practitioners such as GPs, consultants, mental health professionals to feel a degree of confidence that they can engage that process. And that's the important thing. It's about that engagement, the confidence to engage the process.
Oh, that's a lovely and very concise way of explaining it. And before you both go, I've got to ask you, what are your hopes for the next 10 years? We've talked about the previous 10 years of how life with our horses has developed, and I'm wondering, as you look ahead to the next decade, what do you hope, both for Athena Herd but also for the wider equestrian world? What do you hope to see and develop in that time?
Yeah, gosh, it's an interesting question in terms of Athena Herd Foundation, because there's a lot we've done this last year that we hadn't maybe envisaged we were going to do until a couple of years ago. So it really really is a labour of love, and really evolves. Almost like the track system, that's definitely been a labour of love and evolves and is still evolving. It's very much alive. It's very much a live project. I know you mentioned earlier about tracks and surfaces and things like that. I really would love to bring things like a sand area into the track and things like that. So that's definitely something I'm hoping will be able to do within the next 10 years. I guess in terms of what we do, gosh, we've already developed, we've got level 2 qualifications for a certificate, we've got a level 4-5 diploma, and we've actually got a level 7 certificate, and they're all externally accredited. So I think we are just striving for standards in terms of the training arm, maybe bringing in broader external accreditations onto our programs, so opening them up. We are international already, but really maybe bolstering that international feel to our community, and doing more. We are actually scheduled to go to the US this year. We train people in Australia, so hope to maybe go to Australia. So it's just develop and grow and build, I guess, on what we're doing and what we've done already. And on the community arm, Graham, you're busy talking to funding providers. You're really busy and active in that space as well. I don't know. Did you want to talk about that?
So I think it's also about building that social relationship essentially with the community, helping our local community to recognise the value of this process and these processes, bringing people in, because we know that once we get people there, they come back. So it's very much about getting people in a positive way. So it's about actually just really building that relationship with the community, getting people to recognize the value and learning and well-being that we can all develop in that space. And it's probably also about actually, as a team, as an Athena team, building up the team in terms of the facilitators. And so essentially, we've already got some other local facilitators who have been through our training programs. And so from my point of view, it would be really interesting to be able to garner the funding for these programs and let our newly trained facilitators and our developed facilitators build and develop these programs themselves.
And do you both get much time, or any time at all, for your own practices with the horses, whether it be mindfulness or a meditation, or whether it is just going out and walking amongst the herd to see your own horses, to see which horses come up to you? Do you make much time for your own space with the herd?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the mornings are always my thing, as Graham knows. I love to be around them in the morning. That quiet, it's that lovely quiet time before the day starts, and just be with them actually. And that's definitely something that this work has taught me more of, to just be with the horses, just really observe, to observe them and spend time with them. And actually, one of our learners said something the other day that really resonated for me as well. It was that I really notice each and every one of them. So it is, it's just taking time out of my day to actually notice each and every one of them, and yeah, just spend a little bit of time with them. Um, my little boy rides. I've got an 11-year-old boy. He rides horses, and he's developing his awareness of our herd and horses. So I guess it's about also being cognizant of the fact that actually it's still good it's still good to ride horses. It's still good to do other things with our horses, um but it's just making sure we do just be mindful, as Graham says, and actually recognize the fact that it's important ourselves to spend time and enjoy what we have here, and we're very fortunate to be able to do that in the background. Graham, did you want to, and obviously Graham's horses here with the herd.
So I think I'm sure I could put my hand on my heart and say I could do more, but I think it's about practice, Anne-Louise. It's about the fact that actually every time I am with the horses, I have the opportunity to practice some of those things that I talk about, that management of my own energy. So I know that if I don't keep on top of it, I could find myself all over the place before I knew it. So actually, there is something about this. Every time that I step into that herd, that I am connecting with some of those resources, those regulatory resources, emotionally regulatory resources that we've been talking about. Every time I step into that space, so it is the practice is an ongoing one.
And we've all learnt so much listening to both of you talk for the last hour. Thank you so much. And I know that I've learnt more about thinking and managing my energy and my own sort of spatial awareness as I make my way into my very little herd in comparison to yours. But there's so many takeaways, and thank you for sharing your knowledge and your experiences with us. For those who are listening, who want to find out more, who maybe want to visit you, how can they do that?
We've got the website athenaherd.org, and we are also on Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok, and all of the other great things. So yeah, please do have a look.
And it will be so interesting to see where you do end up in the next 10 years. You've come so far from when I met you. I mean, it was so exciting years ago, but now you've come full gallop ahead in the last few years. It'll be very exciting to follow your journey.